Hello everyone, this is Alex with Level Up Plus VFX, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a crowd sim in Blender using AI generated models through PIFuHD on Google Collab. So the very first thing you're going to do is go ahead and open the Google Collab folder that I've linked in the description. Should be at the bottom of that website, and then we're going to go ahead and jump right in. For the very first thing you're going to need to do is make sure over here there will be an option to copy to your Google Drive. Go ahead and do that, and then once you have done that, go ahead and go into Edit, Notebook Settings, and make sure you're set to GPU. I already am because I have done this before. You might have to do that if this is your first time. Then go ahead over to this option over here next to Connect and do Connect to a hosted runtime. Once you've connected to a hosted runtime, go ahead and click on this folder icon just so we have that open and start running these processes. Go ahead and click here to run the import Python, the next one, and we're just going to go down the list until we get to the point where it asks us to import our image. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then over here I'm going to choose Files, Show All, and I think for this one I am going to import this white shirt person. So it might take a minute to upload. Just go ahead, sit back and relax, and I'll see you in a moment once it's done. Some things to note about your image is when I upload my image, I take a picture of myself doing a T pose or an A pose. You're going to need that for when you go ahead and add this character into Mixamo. It's not going to grab your fingers perfectly, but it'll create a decent render result. So go ahead and just do it in an A pose or a T pose. That way it's easy to rig. Now that's uploaded, I'm going to go ahead and just run this second file. They made it easier. Now you don't have to type in anything. You can just click run and you should be good. And we're going to continue through this all the way to the bottom when we get to the run PIFuHD step. The ones that might take the longest would be the importing of the pre-trained model, but again, that should only take a few minutes. If it's taking longer than that, you might want to restart the notebook and try again. Alright, now that we're at the run PIFuHD step, we actually need to change something in our code. This is something that happened recently. I don't know why. I believe it was an update with Python, but we're going to need to go into the PIFuHD folder, go ahead and go to lib, go ahead and go to the meshutil.py and go to line 77. And you're going to want to replace the line there with what I've posted in the description. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that in there. Make sure you grab it and you're not adding any extra spaces, and then go ahead and save that meshutil.py by doing Control S. Now once that's done, go ahead and run PIFuHD. If you run it without doing that, occasionally, and I can't say that this happens all the time, but it was happening for me, it will generate a final image texture, but it won't actually generate your model. I don't know why that happens, but hey, this is the fix for it, so I'm probably going to release that fix just as its own video because I'm sure people were frustrated by it. And I don't know a lot of coding, I don't know a lot of stuff that has to do with how this all works, but I found the fix and I just wanted to share it with everyone. Now that PIFuHD has finished running, we don't need to render any of these other settings, so we're just going to go ahead and go straight into getting our result. Go ahead and go back into the PIFuHD folder, hit the refresh button, and you'll get a results page. Go ahead and go through there, and you're going to have two options. You're going to have the object and the PNG. The PNG is just going to be a very low resolution version of your original image, so I'm actually not going to download that. I'm just going to download my result. And once that's downloaded, we're going to go ahead and open it in Blender, clean it up a little bit, and prep it to go into Mixamo. So now that we have Blender open, I'm going to go ahead and do File, Import. I'm going to import an OBJ, and I'm going to import my file. So I have it right here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now we have our person loaded into Blender. If we go ahead and view this through cycles, you'll notice that there's no texture on him. Again, that's because I didn't download the texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my materials. I'm going to click New, and I'm just going to add an image texture. And this is where I'd recommend going to where you actually have your original picture, not the low-res one that you got from PIFuHD. So once you've loaded in that image texture, go ahead and connect it to the base color, and you should get something that looks like this. Now, something you may notice when you go ahead and connect that image texture is your character will just turn black. That's okay. That's because the UVs aren't aligned properly. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to align my screen up with the Y-axis, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab, A, U, and then I'm going to project it from view. So once that's done, I can go ahead and go over to my UV editor, and we'll see that I have my image of myself looking all very happy, and I have my UVs. So I just need to click S to scale it up, and we're going to line this up as best as we can. So let's go ahead and see here. I think that's actually pretty close. Maybe have it go down a little bit more here. Obviously, the fingers are going to have a bit of a problem to them, but let's go ahead and hit tab. We can see, hey, that's looking pretty good already. Obviously, the face looks pretty goofy, but hey, I'm fine with that. This is a low-resolution character for a crowd. We'll notice that there are some issues with my arms having just these black lines in the sides. That's because at some point this is stretching over a little bit, so we're maybe going to want to scale this in just a tad. Maybe scale it S on the x-axis to stretch it out a little bit. That didn't seem to work. I'm also going to turn this off here so I can see what I'm doing. So if I scale this down a little bit more, maybe move it up on the y-axis again, something like that, we should be pretty good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now the problem is, you'll notice on the back of my head, we just have another image of myself. Now you could project an image of your back if you have one. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to take this UV and I'm going to just clone it over, clone some hair over. Obviously, this isn't a high quality image of myself anyway, so we're just going to fix this the old-fashioned way. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is go back into edit mode, switch this over to the selection circle. I'm going to click, and what I want to do is I want to click on all these areas that I think the hair needs to be in. Switch over to face mode might help make it a little bit easier. And there we go. I'd say that's probably my entire face. Obviously, it's being cloned on my face here. Now the easy way is just do S and then scale it down, move it up onto some hair, and that is, you know, something. It's not perfect, but it works. Now I am noticing that these are being stretched a little bit here. Maybe I can fix that by scaling some of these UVs in. So maybe if I just scale my head in a little bit, there we go. That looks better. And now we have a human head with no double head, no Lord Voldemort for us. I mean, obviously it's not perfect. As you notice, there's some issues up here. What I might do is grab these and just move them up a little bit, so it's a little bit less apparent that there was something there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and go on to modifiers. We're going to add a decimate. As you're going to notice, this is 106, faces, and that's a lot once you get into simulations. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a planar decimate. That brings it down to 25,000, which, that's pretty good. So we're going to apply that, and then maybe if you really want to make it really small, we can do 0.5 or maybe 0.1. And if we do 0.1, that gets us down to 5,000 verts. So I'm going to apply that again. If we hit tab, we'll notice that that is all nice and broken up. Now I want to delete all these extra little bits here. So I'm going to go into my X-ray mode and I'm going to select all the bits that are just floating around. Like that. Hit X and delete the vertices. And now we have a slightly cleaner model. Something you can do, and this is something that you'll notice, is your hands are going to be huge. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select my hands. I'm going to scale them on the Y. So I'm going to shrink them down a little bit. And then that'll look a little bit better, hopefully. Obviously, hopefully you're not expecting to be super close up with these models. But, I mean, if you need to, you might want to just add in some higher quality hands that you model yourself. And I'm having one little issue here with this guy. If I delete that, is that good? Maybe I have to delete this edge. There we go. All right, and yeah, that's a cleaned up model. That's pretty low poly. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna export it and get it ready to add into Mixamo. So go ahead and select your model, do File, Export, FBX. And what we're gonna wanna do is add this to our own little folder, and I'm gonna call this People Example. Double click. And then we're going to do limit to selected objects. This is so if you had multiple people loaded in, you're only exporting this guy. And I'm going to call this white shirt guy. And I'm going to go ahead and click export. Once that's done, let's go ahead and go to Mixamo. Once you're in Mixamo, what you're going to need to do is go ahead and go over to this upload character option, select character file, and now navigate to where you created that character. In mine, I had that as people example, white shirt guy 1. It's going to upload the character. And as we can see, it loaded in just fine. We're going to go ahead and click next. We're going to assign this to my chin, which is, we're going to need to turn off symmetry here, and we're going to put it right there. Turn symmetry back on. Do the wrists. Those seem pretty symmetrical. Do the elbows. Those also seem pretty symmetrical, so we should be good there. Go ahead and do the knees. Those are right here. And go ahead and add one on the groin. Go ahead and click next, and it should calculate your model. And once it's done, it will load in with a little bit of a test animation here. As I'm noticing that there's a little bit of a missing hole in my head. That might be because I decimated a little bit too far. Maybe don't do that second decimate modifier that I added in if you don't want that to happen. Just do the first one. But for the sake of this example, I'm fine with having a hole in the back of my head. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. Click next again, and now we're just going to go ahead and download some walking animations. So I'm going to go ahead and type in walking, and I think I'm just going to do this basic walking animation here. So that looks pretty good to me. What I'm going to want to make sure I'm doing is in place though, and this is the thing that you'll have to do every time you upload a new character or select a new animation. You're going to have to set it to in place, or else it will reset and you'll get certain animations where people are walking around and certain ones where they're walking in place. So make sure that's always checked. Then just go ahead and click download, change your frames per second to whatever you want. I do 24, but you can do 60, you can do 30. Just make sure it's set to FBX with skin, and keyframe reduction is set to none. Go ahead and click download, and once that's downloaded, we can go ahead and start actually making our crowd. So we're back in Blender now, so I'm going to go ahead and do File, Import, FBX, and I'm going to go ahead and import that file. So this is the file that I've downloaded. I'm going to go ahead and import that FBX. If I go ahead and take a look at it, it does have its texture applied to it, and the character is walking in place. Awesome! He does definitely have that hole in the back of his head, so I should have paid more attention when I was setting that up, but hopefully you won't make the same mistake. Let's go ahead and turn this off for now. I'm going to switch this over to my timeline view, and what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to grab these keyframes of the animation, and I'm going to paste them again, grab everything, copy it, paste it, and just fill up my timeline with this animation. That way he's always walking, and we don't have to worry about him freezing halfway through. Anyway, now that that's done, let's go ahead and grab the character, the entire armature. Go ahead and go over into your movement view, and we're just going to move him out of the way. Now we're going to add a plane. This will be our floor. We're going to hit S and hit 5, and then I'm going to go ahead and do that one more time. I'm going to add a plane, and I'm just going to drag this above the floor ever so slightly. This is going to be our emitter object. This is what's going to create the crowd. And you know what? I'm going to make this bottom plane a little bit bigger. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is go over to my physics properties. I'm going to add a collision property, and I'm going to change the stickiness to 2. Then with the actual emitter plane, which we can actually just rename to emitter, we're going to go ahead and add a particle simulation. The very first thing I'm going to want to do is change the number down to something more manageable, like 50, change the frame start and end to 1, make sure I'm on frame 1, and the lifetime to the time of my project, so that's going to be 250. Something to note is you shouldn't go into negative frames to pre-cache, which, you know, I thought I could do at first, but if you have any collision objects in the scene, the crowd simulation will not respect the collision objects until you get to frame 1. So you need to always make sure you're starting and ending on frame 1. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and go over to physics, and I'm going to switch this to Boids. This is how we actually create the crowd. Then we're going to go ahead and go over to render, and we're going to render a collection. I'm going to go ahead and create a new collection. I'm going to call this people. Hopefully you're doing this with more than one person, but I am doing it with just one person because this is an example. I'm going to go ahead and open up this armature, and I'm going to drag the actual mesh into the people collection. If you copy the whole armature, you'll get a armature being referenced and a person being referenced, and it will be a little weird. So just make sure to drag it, don't copy and paste it, and then you should be good to go. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and switch the instance collection to people. And as you'll notice, we have a bunch of tiny little me's just hanging out on this collection. And if we hit play though, oh no, they're just flying around everywhere. And hey, this could be a cool result if you want it to be, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and for one, I'm going to scale them up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and do object rotation. and we're going to start actually changing our Boid settings. So the very first thing we're going to change is we're going to go to allow flight, turn that off, allow land, turn that on. We won't change the land speed at the moment, but we're going to go ahead and do that later. Next thing you're going to want to do is go over to the Boid brain, and you're going to want to add a follow the leader. So these particles follow these rules, and they follow them in order. So first they're going to try to separate from each other, then they're going to follow, and they're going to follow as a flock. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to want to actually add an object for them to follow. I'm going to go ahead and add an empty. We can have this be a cube. You could have this be whatever you want. I'm just going to have it be a cube. And then we're going to go ahead and click on the little particle simulation again. Go over to the flock object. Go over to the follow leader option, and we're going to switch this to our empty, which is that. So now if we go ahead and hit back and we play it again, now all of a sudden, all these people are trying to walk towards my object. But that's weird, they're walking in the wrong direction, huh? So if we move this over here like this, they're gonna follow, and they're also moving just way too fast. So what I wanna do is change a couple more settings in the Boids. Very first thing I'm gonna do is change the max land speed to 2, and maybe the land acceleration should go down to like 0.25. And so if I hit back again and I have that play, now they're walking at a slightly more reasonable pace, but again, they're still walking sideways. So now the way we fix that is this armature actually has a built-in rotation of 90 degrees. That's fine. We're going to go ahead and click Control A and apply the rotation. Then we're going to click the mesh, Control A, apply the rotation. And then what we're going to need to do is click on the armature again, click R and then Z, and then rotate it by 90 degrees. Once you've done that, apply it by Control A rotation, Control A rotation. And now if we play this, we can see that these people should be walking in the right direction, and they're walking at a pretty reasonable speed too. And the great thing about this is if we wanted to, we could go ahead and add some cool modifiers to this. So if I wanted to go ahead and add a subdivision surface above, and we'll do 2 or 3 levels in the viewport, and then add a displace. We'll again put that above here. I'm going to click new, and they all fall down, but we want to go ahead and add a clouds texture. Now again, we can notice that they are following the geometry, which is pretty cool. Now they are floating a little bit above the geometry. They're not really standing on it, and one of the ways we can fix that, and so now one of the ways we can fix them floating above the ground is we can go ahead and go over to MISC in the Boid settings, and we're going to just switch the height. I found that a value of about 0.5 usually works, so let's go ahead and play that. Yeah, that looked pretty good. That looks pretty good. They are still floating a little bit above it, but if we set this actually down to 0.5, they should be standing pretty close to the center. Now they're floating a little bit still, so maybe 0.4. Let's see how that works. And you know what? I think a value of 0.4 works just perfectly for me. Again, this is a simulation meant to be viewed at a distance. It's not a simulation meant to be viewed, you know, up close. So it looks to me like these guys are all walking across the surface. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now you might notice that some of them are glitching through the ground and they're flipping over and they're having that. That's because of the banking settings. So what you might need to do, so I'm going to just go ahead and set the banking and the pitch to 0.5, and let's go ahead and play that one more time, see what happens. Now again, this is a very extreme environment, but yeah, that seems to be working pretty well. And it looks like a couple get confused near the very end as they approach the object, so maybe, you know what, let's go ahead and flatten this environment out a little bit. This was a little too extreme for it, so I'm going to do shade flat to just see. Let's go ahead and play that again. And there we go. So they separate and then they follow. And as they get closer to the object, they still seem to be pretty happy. So I am pretty happy with how that looks. So that's how you do a basic crowd simulation. You can do all tons of stuff with that. I think the biggest thing to watch out for is make sure that your actual speed is, you know, matching. So right now I think they're moving just a little too fast on the ground here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the max land speed to 1. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks a lot more accurate, I think, to me. So once they actually get moving, they're moving across the environment in a way that looks reasonable. Obviously, there's this big little kind of like startup time that they need to take. So what you're going to want to end up doing is having your start frame and end frame be, you know, kind of far out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to something like 500. We're going to do a lifetime of 500 now. Make sure to always update it. So we're going to bake it like that. And then we're going to set my start frame to frame 300. So if we play it now, we'll notice that they're all moving. But again, reminder, you need to copy your animation data. So obviously my animation data was ending too soon, so we're going to paste it here. So now if we play it again, we got all our people walking. That looks pretty cool. Go ahead and, use this method in something cool. If you want, go ahead and @ me on YouTube. Now that you can @ people in the description, I'd love to see what you guys make using this method. Use more characters, do more animations, have some collision objects, make a scene. Might be fun. Anyway, I've been Alex with Level Up Plus VFX, and I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.